Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Jessie, and welcome to my Tiny Talks podcast, the show where we'll dive into self-love, inner child healing, and discovering your soul's purpose. I look forward to chatting with you every single week and helping you grow exponentially in all areas of your life. Without further ado, here's today's Tiny Talk. Hello, you guys, and welcome back to another episode of Tiny Talks. We are on episode 21, which is pretty crazy to think that we have surpassed 20 episodes. It has been such a positive and honestly life-changing journey since beginning this podcasting experience. And I think that today's subject is very much in alignment because these are a lot of things that I used to tell myself before I decided to start a podcast. I used to live in a world with very limited thinking, very limited thoughts, very limited beliefs. I kept myself very small to keep myself safe, which is something that I think that a lot of us do, and it does play its role at certain times of our lives when we do need to keep ourselves safe or whatever that may look like. However, living our whole life from a place of fear or with those limited thinking of what will happen really can keep us small. And I'm extra excited about this podcast because, again, this is a couple subjects and things that I have overcome. So I have been able to see both sides of this teeter-totter and really how one side can keep us small. And so today's episode is going to be all about how limited thinking or thoughts could be or might be holding you back from success or holding you back from achieving your ultimate highest level of success. And so, kind of to preface limited thoughts or limited thinking, basically this is any kind of story or statement that we tell ourselves. And I think that we all have those go-to things that we like to tell ourselves that really do begin to shape our identity and the way that we live our lives and the way that we communicate, the amount that we're willing to get outside of our comfort zone, whatever it is. And so for today, I am going to go over 9 different limiting thoughts. And these are limiting thoughts that I hear not only all the time from other folks, but definitely just limiting thoughts that I thought as well that I had and really did begin to shape my identity and really were holding me back in a lot of areas of my life. And the first one that I want to chat about with you all today is one that absolutely drives me bonkers. And this one drives me bonkers because I know that we all have the capability to view this as something different. However, I hear this all the time. So the first limiting thought that might be holding you back from success is the common phrase, "I don't have time." And I want you to just pause and ask yourself for a moment how many times you find yourself saying this of I don't have time to do personal development, or I don't have time to run a business, or I don't have time to go back to school. Whatever it is, we have all these reasons and things in our life, and maybe things that we want to do, but we always come back to that statement of I don't have time. And time is a really weird and unique thing because when we start to see time as really what it is, which is just a social construct, because if we think of time, really, it doesn't exist. It's a man-made thing that helps us understand where we are in the day, to schedule things, to know when our bodies are supposed to eat, when we're supposed to sleep, etc., etc. But time really is just a social construct. And when you empower yourself to create a belief that works for you instead of against you, it really allows our lives to flow a lot better. And so when we use that statement, I don't have time, we are automatically shutting down any capability or possibilities that we're able to do something outside of our normal schedule. And so what I began to do is, because this was something that I used to tell myself all the time, I don't have time to run a business. I don't have time to host a podcast. I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. It was a story I was telling myself over and over and over again. And it wasn't until I got a coach and I really began to look at the areas of my life that I was pouring time into to see where my priorities were. So basically what I did is I made a long list of everything in my life that was taking up my time. And I did how much energy I was putting into those things and how much I was getting out of those things. Because the truth of the matter is, we often spend a lot of time doing things in the run of a day that really aren't fulfilling us or getting us any closer to our goal. Think about how much time we just spend mindfully scrolling on our phone, or how much time we spend in our mind, or how much time we spend talking to our friends, whatever it is. And again, we all have different priorities and things that we want to get done. But when we just have that frontal belief that we don't have time, we're never going to go for those things. We're never even going to try, because we've already told ourselves that we don't have the time to do it. And so again, something that is super helpful is to use a spreadsheet or to journal or to write down to measure the ways that you're using your time, and to really be truthful with yourself about what you find when you look at that. And as you look closely at how you use your time, you will notice patterns of behavior that can cause you to really get into your own way. And so if there's something that you really want to go after, I encourage you to find those gaps of time in your day that work for you. For example, my Young Living business, I spend maybe 15 to 30 minutes a day working on that business. And that's it. And that for me works, because I'm plunging in 15 to 30 minutes a day every single day, instead of spending 7 hours on the weekend focusing on your business. So again, the thing about time is that we all have 24 hours in the run of a day. We all are given the same amount of times. However, a lot of us live different lives and have different responsibilities and different things. But I guarantee you, there are little plunks of time throughout your day that you do have time to do things. It always just comes back to those excuses and priorities and things that we're doing for ourselves. So looking at our time is really a huge one that can get in our way of optimizing our success, because again, it's a story that we're telling ourselves. The second limiting thought or belief, and this is one that I have heard and I have believed pretty much as young as I can remember. This is something I think every single one of you listening can relate to in some way, shape, or form. And that is the simple statement of, I can't. And this is one of the most limiting beliefs that you can imagine. And that's because it gives you no opportunity of who you are being able to become. And when you begin to tell yourselves that you can't do something, of course, your mind's going to believe that and believe that you can't do something. And the more that you repeat that statement and tell yourself that you can't do something, the more that you're going to believe that and therefore not even try. Your unconscious mind is always listening to those stories that we tell ourselves, and it responds to what you're telling it. And that is so true in all areas of our life. If we've already told ourselves we can't cook, your belief around cooking is probably just that you can't. So what do? You likely source out. You get somebody else to cook. You go out to get your food. You buy pre-cooked things, whatever it is, because you've already told yourself that you can't do it. And again, the thing is about that phrase of I can't is that it always comes down to a choice, because we can do anything we set our minds to, even if we don't have the skills to do it yet. So again, coming back to cooking, maybe you're not the best at cooking right now, but there's nothing within you that says that you can't do that except for your mind. You can do anything, again, that you set your mind to, even if you don't have those skills. And those skills and those abilities will be learned over time. If you truly believe you can't at the moment, one thing that is super helpful is to add the word yet at the end of your statement. Again, I can't cook yet, but I'm going to try tonight to cook something for the first time. Maybe I follow a super easy recipe for beginners, or whatever it is in any context of your life. When we tell ourselves that we can't do something, we often then say that to other people and kind of laugh it off. If you ever remember a time when a friend or a teacher or a colleague or someone told you like, hey, let's go skiing. And let's say you've never been skiing. So you say, oh, I can't ski. And that's just a kind of silly example, but then we don't even go and we don't even try. But if we really think about any skill in our life, at one point or another, we couldn't do that. We couldn't always speak. We couldn't always walk. We couldn't always drive right? There's lots of things that we couldn't always do. And if we just kept those beliefs, imagine the world that we would live in. So I really encourage you to ask yourself those areas of your life that you're telling yourself that you can't do something. Is it true that maybe you couldn't do it at a certain age of your life and that you're just not trying? Are you not trying out of fear? Are you not trying out of an identity of something that somebody else has told you? Do you believe you can't do something because you've tried one time and failed? It's really getting to those deeper conversations with ourselves to ask ourselves where those underlying beliefs and thoughts come from. Because when we tell ourselves those stories, it often comes from something in our past or an experience we've gone through or witnessing somebody else go through something that begins to shape that identity for ourselves. So again, next time you have one of those thoughts come to your mind of I can't, I encourage you to empower yourself to say, I can't yet, but maybe I can in the future and I'm going to try. And that's all that we can do. The third limiting thought that I have on here is kind of the same, but it kind of wraps our identity into it as well. So it's, I can't because I am not. And so adding a reason to I can't gives the limitation even more power. So basically you're attaching your identity with your thoughts. Those statements of I am really do begin to shape how we view ourselves and how the world begins to view us. Because when we use the words I am, you're making a statement about yourself, your identity, who you believe that you are. And when we believe something about ourselves, it's often hard for us to pivot that and to go in another direction because that's our identity. That's just who we are. And so I really want to give an example about this. So as I said, beginning this podcast journey, I used to say to myself all the time, I could never be a podcast host because I'm not a speaker and I'm very shy. So I've always enjoyed listening to podcasts. For years, I have loved listening to podcasts and just learning from others. And I remember having this deep-rooted goal in myself of wanting to be a public speaker and wanting to share my experiences with the world. But I would always tell myself, I can't because I'm shy, or I can't because I'm not a speaker. And although, yes, at that time I was not a speaker, I had held on to that identity of I am shy. And I remember thinking back in high school, in elementary school, in middle school, and honestly all the way up until university, I was always the quiet one in class, sitting in the back of the classroom. And this got so bad indeed that when I was in university, one of my teachers put these tokens on my desk. And I had 3 tokens. And I had to speak at least 3 times in a 3-hour lecture. And each time I would speak or ask a question or answer a question, my professor would take a token away. And if I still had any tokens left on my desk by the end of class, I would actually lose points for that class, lower my GPA because of that. But because I just had that identity that I was shy, I found it very hard to speak. It would really disrupt my system because I had just believed that about myself for so long. But now here I am, a podcast host, doing things that I never thought that I would because I just began to challenge that slowly over time. I got around people who believed in me and showed me the way to accomplish what I was hoping to accomplish. So when we have those statements, I encourage you to get to the root of it. Where is this coming from? Why do you indeed believe that about yourself, that you can't do something? What part of your life has shaped you to think that about yourself? Because it's more oftentimes than not, it comes from something, an experience, something that somebody has said, a parent, a caregiver, a sibling, a friend, whatever it is. So the next time you catch yourself saying, I can't because I am not blank, ask yourself if that I am not is something that, again, was maybe something that shaped your identity a few years back, but maybe is something that has shifted. Maybe you've improved in that area and you didn't even know. Maybe you're not willing to try because you're just afraid to get feedback. just like with all these points, it's so important that we do that deep work to get to the root cause of where it's coming from. Because like any limiting belief, it is something rooted within us that begins to believe in that, and we hold on to it. We hold on to it because that's our comfort zone. We feel comfortable there. And I read a quote today that really just screamed life of explaining comfort zone, and it basically said, your comfort zone is not your present. It's your past. And think about how true that is. Our comfort zone isn't our present. That's what made us safe and comfortable in our past. Our comfort zone now is just holding us in one spot out of scaredness or worry about what will come next. So ask yourself, how many times have you told yourself, I am not good at something, or I can't because blank? And speaking of not being good enough, that is point number 4. This is again something that I am very guilty of, and I know that all of us are guilty of telling ourselves that we are not good enough. I hear this time and time and time again. And I just think that if we look at that, there's such varieties of where that could come from. And that feeling of feeling like you're not good enough is probably the most fundamental limiting belief that there is. And it's one that really can, and that most of us can attest to, have told ourselves at some point in our lives and another. And one thing I always like to highlight about not being good enough is that we might not be the absolute best at something, but that doesn't mean that it'll always be that way. Because I guarantee you, you are much better at something now than you were a year ago, than you were 5 years ago, right? We are all constantly growing and evolving, but when we hold that identity that we are not good enough, it allows us to stay in that space. So again, challenge that little voice in your head that tells you that you're not good enough. Throw in that word, I am not good enough yet. Right? And the thing about that statement again is we all have to start somewhere. We all have to start at the beginning, putting one foot in front of the other, and keep on going. We are not meant to be at our highest level of success when we begin our journey. That is what makes life a journey and what allows us to evolve and to grow as humans. But if we just hold on to that, I'm not good enough, we're not even allowing ourselves the opportunity to try. Even if we think of our school system, and I say all this school-related stuff because I work in the school system, but if we gave a kindergartner a grade 12 test, I can guarantee you that kindergartner wouldn't be able to accomplish that test. But if we switch those roles and we gave a grade 12 a kindergarten test, I guarantee you they would ace it. And that's just to put into perspective that as we grow and as we evolve, we learn things. We put those foot in front of another. We check those boxes. We gain more knowledge as we go through the grade levels and as we go through ages in our life and experiences. So although that kindergartner probably, I would hope not, maybe they could unless they're a genius, pass that grade 12 test in kindergarten, once that child reaches grade 12, they will have gained such more knowledge and understanding to be able to prepare them for that test. And it is the same with anything in our life. If it is a business, if it is a podcast, if it is a mission, if you're writing a book, whatever it is, no, you're not as good as you will be in a year's time of investing in that. But that is what makes the journey fun, because we're learning and evolving and growing along the way. Imagine how boring life would be if we just knew everything, if we just had it all figured out all the time. That is what makes our minds expanding such a journey. So begin to ask yourselves, am I not good enough now, but am I able to get better down the road? Am I not doing this thing out of fear of not being good enough, or can I maybe find little ways to figure out the pieces to begin this journey? So ask yourselves how often you find yourselves telling yourself, I am not good enough. Again, where is that rooted within you? Where do you feel that in your body? Why do you feel that in your body? Where does that come from? And challenge that. Get to the root of it. The fifth one, and this is something that largely came into my life, especially when I began my network marketing company. And that is, I will be judged. Think of how many times in our lives we have wanted to do something, but we don't do it out of fear of what other people will say. We can often hold ourselves back from doing new things because we're afraid that other people will judge us. But remember, we often focus on our fear. And the more we focus on this, the more that we'll begin to see examples of people judging us. Because if we're just hyper-focused on the fear or on being judged, we're going to find those excuses and find those reasonings. It's like anything in life. When we begin to look and hyper-focus on something, we're going to begin to see those things. But at the end of the day, just like anything in life, we have no control over what others will think or feel or say or do. However, we do have the power and control to focus on the things that make us happy. And I remember beginning my network marketing company, not posting on Facebook because I knew I had a lot of friends and family members on there that I didn't want them to know that I was doing a network marketing company. So I kept everything very small and hidden. And after a year of doing that, I realized that this is something that I truly believe in. And those that will support me are going to be there to support me. And those who don't, won't. And that's the thing about life, is if something is making us happy and fulfilled, the right people will be there. And the thing about judgment that I think that we often forget is that oftentimes when people judge us, it's out of their own insecurities. Because when we judge someone else for something that they're doing, especially if it's something healthy, that is making them grow, that makes them thrive, is fulfilling them, and we have something negative to say about that, it often comes from a belief or something driven within us. And people do still sometimes say stuff on the internet about network marketing. And all that we can do in those situations is educate and or just accept of knowing that people are going to say things no matter what we do. So we might as well just go for those things that make us happy. Again, another quote, and I don't remember exactly what it said, but it's basically went along the lines of, people will talk if you don't do it. People will talk if you do it. So you might as well just do it. And I think that that is so true, and something that I really wish was instilled in us more as children, that other people saying things to us is often hurt within themselves. If people are judging us, that is theirs to hold. That is not your responsibility to hold. And not going for that thing out of fear what somebody else will think is only going to give you those consequences. So again, ask yourselves, in 5 years, am I going to regret not doing this thing because something that John Smith said to me one day? Right? Bring awareness to that. Be kind to yourselves. Know that if it's something that makes you happy, it doesn't matter what anybody else says. And again, maybe those people aren't in alignment with your life anymore. If somebody doesn't give you that love and support, then maybe they aren't meant to be there for the journey and the outcome when you get to the end result. Okay, number 6, one that I absolutely love. And I love this one, especially when you begin to pivot it. So it's basically, I am not as good as them. And we tell ourselves all the time, we'll never be as good as X, Y, and Z. So why would I even try? But the thing is, you guys, is that you are not X, Y, and Z. I am not X, Y, and Z. I will never be that person. You will never be that person. And that is what makes us all unique and special. Again, imagine if we were just all the same. We hit the same goals. We did the same things in any area of our life. How boring would that be? I do not want to be as good as anybody else because that is not my life. I want to be better than I was a year ago, than I was 5 years ago. I want to grow and to be better than myself. And imagine if we all had that mentality that we are not fighting against other people. We oftentimes think that way because it's easier to project that onto other people. But what if we all just began to focus on how can we be better than ourselves? And I think this quote often comes down to not wanting to try because we begin to compare our beginning of our journey to the end of somebody else's, somebody who's gone through years of experience of trial and error. We begin to compare to that. And I think that with this one, if I'm not as good as them, instead of having that mentality, what if we began to go to them or to look up to them as role models? How can I learn from their mistakes so that I don't make some of the same mistakes? What can I learn from their journey that can help me on my journey? Right? When we begin to tell ourselves that we're not as good as them, we're not even giving ourselves permission to try. But if you've never done something before, of course you're not going to be better than someone who's done it for a long time. We have to put in the work, right? We have to learn, we have to grow. And again, that's what makes it a journey. And I say a journey a lot in this podcast because if we are going for success and we are having these limiting thoughts, but we want that success, it is a journey because we are trying to unlearn these things that we've told ourselves for years. So of course you're not going to be as good as someone who's done something for years because you've never done it before. But it doesn't mean that you can't get to the same level as them or even surpass them. But if our only thought is that we will never be as good as them, guess what? You won't, because you're not even going to put in the work or the effort to try to get there. Okay, number 7. I have failed. If you often tell yourself that you have failed, then you will eventually stop giving things a go, right? And I have a whole podcast dedicated just directly to failure because I have really pivoted my thoughts and beliefs that surround failure. Because again, believing that you have failed is extremely, extremely disempowering because it's very closely linked to the belief that you're a failure. And those are very toxic things to tell ourselves because it means that you will avoid doing things that may lead you to feel that way about yourself in the future. And the thing is, we as humans don't like failure. It makes us uncomfortable, especially in society's eyes. It makes us feel like we're less than. However, just like in my last episode about failure doesn't mean less than. It does not mean an end result. It is what you do with failure that is going to make or break your future. Because I promise you, I have recorded tons of podcast episodes that will never see the world because they, quote unquote, failed. They didn't live up to standards. And I could have just threw in the towel, and trust me, you guys, there's been some days that I want to quit because some days are just harder than others. But I recognize that identity of that, I'm not going to post this, I failed, I'm going to give up, isn't going to get me anywhere. What can I learn from that mistake? How can I re-listen to that episode and tweak it so I don't do that moving forward? What lessons can we take from quote unquote failure that we can then learn and grow ourselves? Again, I mentioned this in my last podcast episode. Imagine anything in life. Anything. Absolutely anything. In your house, your room, your laptop, your phone, your vehicle, anything. That wasn't just done or made in one try. That took trial and error, failure, until one day it wasn't a failure and it was a success. And then that success was then tweaked and made better, and then tweaked and made better. So having that mentality of I have failed, why should I try? You're right. Why should you try? If that is your only mentality, there's no point. Because we are going to keep ourselves so small. We have to begin to give ourselves grace that we tried and we failed, but guess what? We tried. And when we try in anything in our lives, we need to give ourselves some credit for that. So again, change the narrative. And I'm beginning to recognize that at the beginning of this episode, I said that I had 9 points. I actually have 8. So my final point for you guys is they really are all closely tied together, but it's just direct quotes that I hear all the time. And the last one that I have here is, I can never do this. And if you tell yourself that you can never do something, again, you will avoid it at all costs in the future, because it doesn't feel good when we receive tons of reminders of our inability to do something. We often go our whole lives with the same identities and limiting thoughts because they've shaped our identity and our values. So many of us live our whole lives believing that we can never do something. And so guess what? We never will. But what if that was only true at one time in your life? What if it's just a story that you've been telling yourself based on one experience or one person's thoughts? And so I know for me personally, a lot of my limiting thinking and belief comes from things that past relationships have told me, my past experience with coaches have told me, past professors have told me, my parents have told me, I've told myself, right? We begin to hyper-focus on those things because we are so much better at telling ourselves the things that we can't do, the things that we've done wrong, than we are at giving ourselves permission to be kind, to see the good, to see the light, to see the potential. So saying that I can never do something with that mentality, I guarantee you that you're right. You can't. Because if we've told ourselves that we can never do something, there's no capacity in our brain that's going to allow us to do something. If we tell ourselves, I can never do this, instead pivoting that to, again, maybe I couldn't do this in the past, but I'm going to try to do it a little bit differently this time. Shaping the narrative, retraining our mind. And I've said this acronym before, but it's catch it, change it, release it. And that's kind of the bottom line of this episode, is identifying and acknowledging your limiting beliefs. The first step with identifying your limiting beliefs and taking back that power that is within you is to catch it. So catch yourself telling yourself those things. When do you notice yourself saying those things? Change it. How can I change the narrative for myself to be gentle, to be kinder? And release it. Let it go. Our brain is constantly laying down new neural pathways. It is constantly rewiring and changing. And we often think that our brain just is the way that it is. But that is so far from the truth. Our brain is changing every single second. Our beliefs are changing every single second. And I know that this is true because I guarantee you, if you told me a year ago that I would be on here talking to you guys, I probably would have ran and hid in a room. My belief in myself that I could empower other people or talk to other people or change someone's life wasn't even fathomable in my brain at the capacity that I had at that time. But over work and over time of catching those thoughts and changing them and releasing them, yes, some days are still hard. Yes, I still have a ton of limiting beliefs that I am working through. And that's the thing, is we will always have limiting beliefs. We're human. We will always see the negative side before the positive. But we can begin to lessen that, to begin to see the positive more often, to begin to see the potential that is within ourselves that we all have. We might just not have right now. And that is okay. That is self-reflection. And we all need to do that a little more often, because I think that there can also be a flip side to this, where our ego is so high that we think that we can just do anything and there's no limiting beliefs and nothing can get in our way. And yes, that is a good way of thinking. However, there's two spectrums to this. And we really do have to be in the middle of all life and all journey that we go through is, again, a journey. It is an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to evolve. I truly, truly hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. This is something that I've been thinking about sharing for a while now, and it's just something that is, again, very near and dear to my heart. Just like every episode I put out really does come from my heart, because I know what it's like to just live in that area of not feeling like you're good enough or worthy enough. But I promise you that if you put in the work and you try and you find mentors or someone that is ahead of you in that thing that you want to do, and you grow from them and you aspire to be that and you put in the work, I guarantee you that I promise you that there is no reason why you are less capable than anybody else who's accomplished your wildest dream. I'm sending you all so much love and kindness and just smiles. I'm so excited that spring is in a couple weeks and longer days and sunshine. And I just hope that you are all feeling good and feeling empowered. And I hope that listening to this really just pivots your mindset that you are so worthy of anything that you set your mind to. And it really does come down to those things that we tell ourselves on a day-to-day basis in our little noggin. So much love from my heart to yours. I hope you all have the best day ever, and I look forward to chatting with you all next week. Bye, you guys. Thank you all so much for tuning into this week's episode of Tiny Talks. If you're looking to connect, you can find me on Instagram at JessieBrown13. I look forward to chatting with you all next week. And remember, get out of your head and into your heart.